to the cloud. Got it? Great. Okay. Phew. I guess I should have said that all in the recording. Update. Friday's class will just be a quiz that you do on your own time. And so you have some free time, I guess, on Friday. There, shorthand version. Okay. Let's see here. So what I wanted to do was go through, and I can't see here. Go through the data visualization section of that R for data science section. It's focused on ggplot, and ggplot is a little bit it's a little bit hard to learn in the beginning, because the idea is that you have these layers. So first you set up a kind of a blank space, and then you put layers on top, and you can tweak each layer as much or as little as you want. And so that can get overwhelming in the beginning. So even if you've worked in ggplot, there's no harm in us going through it again, and just kind of going through it together. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start a new R Markdown file, because it's kind of the easiest thing to work in. So here, I'll call this data visualization. Okay. So what I'm going to do, because I want to start a fresh thing, fresh document, I'm actually just going to remove all of this, because that's just there to help you see. It's a minimal working example to show you some of the key aspects that we could be doing. So there's nothing here that we need for the document to run. In fact, we can save it. So I am going to use some shortcuts here, and I'll call it data viz, because I'm cool like that, and put it on my desktop. Then I'm going to save. Notice no spaces in the names, because if there's a space in the name, then it typically acts up. I've seen it where it works, and it's really mind-boggling, but I don't know. I just don't like spaces in there, I guess. So then, even if I knit from here, it should just produce a document, right, with nothing in here. Right. Title, name, date. You can change the formats there, but that's a good start. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we want to bring in the library. So the thing with R is, well, the initial download is relatively small, okay? But the reason for that is because you bring in what we call libraries as you need them. Oh, yeah, thank you. I forgot about the transcript. Sorry about that. Okay. Let me close this. Okay. So we bring in libraries as we need them. We only have to install the libraries, which means that's when we do an actual download. So we do an install of the libraries. You only have to do that once for each computer, or if you kind of update your computer, then you might have to reinstall those packages. So what I would recommend you do is have a file, a running file of some sort that has all the packages that you installed as you go, okay? I forget to update mine sometimes, but it's a good jumping off point. So what I mean is I would usually have just an R script like this, and we're gonna install the package, the tidyverse package, okay? So notice how it comes up with some options here. So install.packages, And then it likes to have the package names in quotes. There are other ways that you could install the packages. Let me move the chat here. You could go to packages and then find the package. So you could search for tidyverse and then install it. It really doesn't tidy, probably this one. Okay, and then I would hit install. I already have the tidyverse package, so didn't do that. But anyways, I'm going to keep a running file here of the packages that I install, right? And that's been really useful to me when my computer died one time, for example, and I had to get a new one and I had to get up and running really quickly. And so then I just ran all these packages and I was pretty well up to snuff. Okay, so it's going to look like this, tidyverse. Okay. And then if I run this, so if I want to run this to the actual brain, then I need to run it down here in the console, right? And so you can have your cursor anywhere on the line and then Command or Control Enter. Oh. It claimed to restart R. I think I'm going to hit no there because I already had it and I think it was not loving what I was trying to do. So, but now it's thinking down here. So notice in the console, it's thinking away, thinking, and it's installing those packages, right? You only need to install a package once. And then once you have it, to access things in that package, you're going to use the library command. And that has to be in your document because your document relies on commands and data from the tidyverse package. So otherwise it won't know what to do. So what we do is we can insert a new R code chunk. So notice if you hit the insert and then insert a new R code chunk. Now you could insert a Python code chunk, a SQL code chunk, a stand code chunk, Bash if you're, that cool. I'm not. Yikes. So you could insert any sort of code chunk, but the main one, of course, is R. So notice how it just does it, or you could type it out, right? But for me, that makes me I don't want to have to remember what it looks like. Eventually, it just sinks into your memory, but I rarely memorize anything, right? And so that's what I want you, that's kind of the mindset that I want you to have going into this, is that you shouldn't be memorizing anything. You should know what's available, right? What could you do? Could you calculate the mean? Could you calculate the standard deviation? Could you make a box plot? Yes. Right? Do you have to remember exactly how to do that? No, right? You need to be able to find it quickly, right? Or maybe not quickly in the beginning, right? But you're going to have some resources and you could even start. And of course, there is a mean. So if you want to calculate the mean of something, then you could look at the mean function and go from there, right? So, you don't have to, yeah, that's kind of my main thing, because people feel like they have to memorize this stuff and there's no point in doing that at all. Right? You just need to kind of work your way to it. So then what you need to do in your document is to open the library called tidyverse. Now, for some reason, right, and there's a couple of different ones, it comes up with different options, but I'm going to open up the tidyverse package. The R markdown that we're working in is a standalone document, right? And so it's going to be separate from the console and everything else that we see in the other three quadrants, okay? And so you want to make sure that the markdown document is kind of running and it has everything that it needs. But if you want to check stuff on the outside before you knit the document to run it to see if it works, then you can run it in the console. So what I mean by that is you could be in this library tidyverse command. Notice that there's no quotes around tidyverse now. It's only when you install a package. So now if I run this by either copy paste or control or command enter, it brings it down into the console down here. So now I have it available in the brain that I can see. Okay. So now, if I have a look at that data package, and notice how they have the code chunks. So moving over to the R for Data Science textbook here, notice how they have the code chunks already for you. So you can just hit copy and then paste it, right? Just use those shorthand shortcuts. Couldn't think of the word to finish shorthand. Shorthand shortcuts? No, just shortcuts. So the tidyverse package is loaded, so that's good. So now what I can do is, if we want to look at the miles per gallon data set, which is built into the ggplot2 package, which has been loaded. So there are lots of different packages that are loaded. So you have the ggplot2, you have the tibble, you have the tidyr, you have the readr, you have the per dply or whatever, by installing the tidyverse. So it's kind of like a big package that you bring in, and it's pretty well everything you'll need. So if we want to look at the MPG data, right, we can look at it like this by saying MPG, and I can run that. Right. So when I run it in the console, it says MPG is a tibble. A tibble is just, it's a data frame, but it's a little bit easier to work with. So it's kind of a new age thing. I kind of growing up with R, we didn't have tibbles, but they're really nice because they can just, they're a little bit more flexible, I guess, but it is just a data set. It is just a data frame with names up top. So the variable names up top, and then instead of showing all 234 observations, which it says it has here, it just shows the first 10, just as a rule, right? And then it's not overwhelming your report, okay? I wouldn't really include just the data from the output in your output. But if I knit this here, let me see here, it's thinking. All right. So now it's got this library tidyverse with a bunch of stuff here. And it's got the miles per gallon showing the tibble, which we saw in the console, right? So it's just showing the exact same thing that we saw. But we mentioned this earlier. What if you want to suppress the output, right? So what if you don't want to show the output? You just want to show the code that you looked at. So often you want to, especially for me, if I'm marking stuff, you want to show me things that you tried, right? You don't want to hide those. You want to show me that, you know, you tried these things, they didn't really work. And then I can go and look through them. So if you just want to show your code without the output, then what you do is you can add it as a kind of an element to that R code chunk. Okay. So separate it by a comma, and then you can have a space or no space. I like to have a space just to keep it clean, and then notice that we have all these options, right? And so the one that you want, and again, you don't have to remember, there's echo, okay? Echo equals true means that it shows the code. Echo equals false means that it doesn't show the code. So that's not the one that I want, but it's a good one to keep in mind. And the one I want is actually the eval. Do I want this to be evaluated in my report or not? Right, so here, oops, eval equals false. True, false is all caps typically. So now if I try this, hopefully it works. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, right? That's the game. So now notice now that it shows that you pulled in the library called tidyverse, and it shows that you had a look at the miles per gallon, but it doesn't show the output because it doesn't contribute anything. Okay. So for my text, right? If you're writing a report, and this is going to be a fake report, obviously, and I'll post this markdown document on our Moodle page once we finish, because they're kind of our notes from today, right? But we start, now you get to see how slow of a typer I am, or sloppy rather. We start by importing the tidyverse library. Okay. This is kind of extra, but it's nice. What if I want to emphasize that this is a tidyverse is an R function? Then I can wrap it up in little backticks. Notice how it changed the color slightly. So when I knit this, and I like to have a space after just in case. So when I knit this, notice how it highlights that it was some R code, right? It's from R. You could have it without those backticks, that's fine. But I just want to show you some things that you can do to make your report look a little bit cooler if you're referring to functions in R. Okay. Then we looked at the MPG data set. Right? So again, MPG is from R, so I'm going to wrap it up in backticks. And yeah, I forget to do it sometimes, but it just makes it look a little bit more sophisticated. So then what we did to suppress the output in our report, we use the eval equals false argument. Okay. Okay. Good. So now if I knit this, we've got it going on. So now, what if I wanted to have miles per gallon? Because I can run miles per gallon down here, but what if I wanted to see miles per gallon like we're probably used to seeing data sets up here in this environment? So in order to do that, what I do is I'm going to put a comment, but now in my code to remind myself what I was doing. Right, so I'm not explaining in a report kind of way, I'm explaining to myself, the coder, that I am going to assign the MPG tibble to MPG to access it in the environment. Okay, so how do I do that? I go MPG. I'm just going to call it MPG, but just for emphasis, I'll call it MPG1 just so you can see that they're different. Okay. MPG1 is going to be assigned to MPG. Okay. So now I could do something like summary of MPG1, okay, and I can knit that document. Okay. So the summary command just basically gives a 5-number summary. So if I knit this, oh, I'll put it in a fresh code chunk where the eval is actually true. How about that? Cut and insert in our code chunk. There's a shortcut for inserting in our code chunk, but I can't remember what it is. So now if I knit this.
I know what it is.
Oh, wait. Say that again.
The shortcut for inserting an R code chunk or R code chunk.
What is it?
It's Control Alt I.
Control Alt I. Aha.
Yeah, if you hold your cursor over insert, it just pops up and it says it.
Control Alt I. We're in business. I'm gonna remove that one though for now, but thank you. Once upon a time, I knew all the shortcuts, but now I've forgotten. I have to relearn. But why didn't it like? I wanted to knit this. Sorry, let me just, it should have worked. Oh, because it didn't run the library command. This is actually good. Oh, table or tibble. You can call it a table, but it's technically a tibble. It's a data frame. The eval equals false actually says, do not evaluate whatever I told you to do in here, just show the code. So the problem is, so here, what I was trying to do was I was trying to knit this, and the error that I got was object MPG not found. Took me a second, but what I had forgotten was that I told it not to evaluate library tidyverse, which is the keeper of MPG. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it here in my code chunk, and then I'm going to knit it. And now it should be happy. There is a way to kind of not show this this output here, but I'm going to leave that for now. You can look into it. But so now if I have miles per gallon 1 is everything that's in miles per gallon. So it's basically just duplicating it here. And then I can talk about miles per gallon 1. It's pretty stupid of me to take a 3-letter name and assign it to a 4 alphanumeric name, right? So that's not usually what we do. We usually kind of condense data sets that have long names. But in this case, I just wanted to show you that they weren't going to be the same. What you could have done is just said MPG gets MPG, and then the MPG that you're referring to is, well, either one because they're the same. But what I wanted to show you was that if I don't run this MPG1 gets MPG down in the console here, and I just try to run summary MPG1, even though MPG1 is defined up above, the console doesn't know that, right? So when I try to run the summary of MPG1, it says, hey, this isn't found. And that throws a lot of students for a loop, right? You feel like you have it defined here, right? And so why isn't it working down in the console? So everything we have to do, we basically do it twice. We do it once in the console because the console needs to know everything if you want to see the data set, right, or the data frame. Or you could just go in blind and work only in the markdown file, but I've never managed to do that successfully. So if you do pull that off, good for you. You'll be knitting a lot. But now if I run MPG1, notice how the MPG1 is now stored in the environment tab, right? And I can look at just some of the details of MPG1, I could even look at, because I know in the beginning it's a little bit scary to not see the data set. So if you hit this little Excel looking icon here, it'll pull up the data set so that you can see it, right? You can't really do anything here. It's not like Excel or anything like that, but sometimes it's just nice to see it, right? When we're starting out, this is what we're used to looking at, right? And then you can kind of work from there. Now, okay, so now if I run summary of MPG1, now it knows what to do, right? Because it knows what MPG1 is. Okay. I'm just gonna see if I can find that code that makes it not produce that tidyverse. It says attaching all these packages, blah, 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 blah. So let's see if we can find something. You have the same problem. Which problem? I've had a lot of errors so far. Oh, MPG not found. Okay, then you'll want to make sure that you have, so remember how we changed this to eval equals false? You could either remove that and just have the R in the curly brackets. You need to make sure that it runs the library tidyverse. Cool. Oh, someone's question out there. Whenever I hear some static, it's a question for me. There are some classes where I get scared when I hear like a little bit of shuffling because no one ever says anything. In this class, no, I expect to hear stuff. Okay, let me know if there's a question. Otherwise, I'm moving on. Oh yeah, what were we looking for? I was trying to find a way to have it not show all that kind of stuff. So I feel like there was something that caught my eye earlier. Anyways, easy enough to Google, right? How do I suppress? So the keyword there would be suppressing, and then as long as you follow it up with in R. So how do I suppress? I have to knit it to see what it might be called. Come up with a word. How do I suppress library output in R, right? Or R markdown if you want to get specific. And I feel like they might have shown it here, or maybe I was looking somewhere else. Anyways, I don't see it. Another thing that I want to point out, because if you're reading help pages, a lot of them are, you know, they come off as really advanced when they're not necessarily that advanced. Okay. For example, they might use this kind of notation. So I've highlighted it on the page there, and I wonder if I can I zoom in? So they use this shorthand of the package name and then colon, colon, and then the function name. Okay, so it's just a way to say, instead of saying, we're going to use, so if I look at this one here, we're going to use the ggplot function in the ggplot2 package. So technically it's from the ggplot2, but remember when we use the tidyverse, it brought in ggplot2 among other things. And so what you could do if you were only interested in ggplot, you could bring in install package ggplot2, and then that's all you would have. But the tidyverse takes care of a number of packages. Okay, and so this shorthand, it can look a little bit scary, but if you're used to it, then it's actually really nice to just have that shorthand. And I think you can run it in R just as is, but I'm not used to doing that, but I'm sure you can. Oh yeah, so you can do ggplot2 : MPG, because MPG is part of the ggplot2 package. So here, what if I do this? What if I do ggplot2 : MPG? Or maybe I have some other ones, some other data in there. Diamonds. So you can see which ones are data sets that are included in the ggplot2 package. Diamonds is one of them. Okay, and it comes up with a little description here, a data set containing the prices and other attributes of, and then it's cut off. 54,000 diamonds. The variables are as follows, and you can expand that if you want to. But what if we just do ggplot2 diamonds, and then if I run it in the console, it pulls up that diamonds data set. Okay, so you could do that if you wanted to, but I'm going to comment it out because diamonds is not what we're talking about, though it sounds like a fun data set. So something to look into later. All right, so all right, good. So what we want to do is we want to figure out what's going on with this data set. So what you could do is, the first thing I would do is I usually just go to the help tab down in the bottom right-hand corner quadrant, and I've already searched miles per gallon here, and it has this nice summary. Okay. So what I used to get people to do when I was teaching R initially was, as part of the report, I would get you to just copy and paste this, and that's kind of your introduction to the data set, right? And so we could do that. I'm not going to do that but it is nice because it makes you practice formatting, but it's not so nice because it would just be me formatting for the rest of the time. So instead of that, we're going to talk about, we'll just read the information here. So another way that you could have gotten to this help page is you could have gone $MPG. Oh, and then run it. And then it would pull up this help page. Or what if I go $diamonds? Then it'll bring up that data set, right? And it has a longer description and a description of each variable, right? Which would help you classify which variables are quantitative and which ones are categorical. Okay, so I'm going to comment that as well. So it's there, but it's not going to run. All right. So let's start with this ggplot. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write a little blurb here. Run the summary of the MPG data. And I'm getting lazy, so I'm not putting the backticks here, but you can if you want to be cool. Notice that that's what they're doing here as well. If you zoom in on the page, That's how they've got it to look like that, is with the backticks. Right. So run the summary of the MPG data to see the 5-number summary as well as the mean. And counts, I think, in categorical variables. Pretty sure. I guess we'll see here. I'll run the summary so I can see it in the console. Yeah. Oh, no counts. Run the 5-number summary as well as the mean for all quantitative variables. Quantitative variables. Okay. So here, I removed that. I saved the MPG data as MPG1 so I could access it in the environment tab. It's not necessary, but it is nice. Okay, so now let's make, we'll start with a ggplot. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use the code that they have here, and then I want to talk about it, right? So notice how, again, they have this copy button. So whenever they give you our code, they just let you copy it, right? So that we can try it. Control-Alt-I, fresh our code chunk. The shortcut for a fresh our code chunk is Control-Alt- I. Yeah. I can't remember now. I think I must have spent 2 days at some point trying to figure out how to get emojis into my Markdown. I'm sure it's easy now, but this was like when it was first being developed. And I was like, no, there's a way. I know there is. Now I can't remember.
I can't help you on the emojis, so.
Few emoji, cool emoji, eek emoji. So yeah, maybe there's shortcuts for the emojis now. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. Okay, so I'm just going to copy. So from that textbook, I'm going to copy that code chunk, and then I'm just going to paste it in here in R. Okay, and so it looks bad, right? But what I want to do is just go through each component and talk about it, right? And so here, it's kind of the most basic graph that you're going to get. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit this. Notice how it's referring to MPG, and that's fine because it knows what MPG is because we have the library tidyverse pulled in to the report. But if you wanted to see stuff, then you would use MPG1. Or what could we do? We could just rerun it. MPG gets MPG, right? I only had the one to show you what was going on. And then the summary of MPG. So now I have MPG here, and it's just called MPG, and I can see it, right? So what I want to do is I want to run this code And you could highlight it all and then hit Control Enter, or you could hit the play button, run the current code chunk. So what it does is it thinks for a little bit, and you'll notice there's a little stop sign that comes up sometimes. So that's when it's telling you it's thinking, and you might have to hit stop at some point if you're running some sort of weird infinite loop or something, but usually it'll kind of work out. So here, notice that it switched to the plots tab over here, and now it has this base ggplot plot. Okay. So if I wanted to produce this in base R, so usually for me, if I'm just doing a quick visualization, I'm not going to use ggplot because that's insane. I'm going to just use, in fact, if your goal is to make quick visualizations, not for reports, right? Just for you, for knowledge reasons, you can use base R commands. Okay. So here, I'll show you what that's going to look like. Okay. If you want to make this scatter plot in base R, and the reason I'm doing this is because it needs the same components. And so sometimes I feel like when we introduce ggplot, it kind of assumes that you've already worked in base R graphics, and that's not always the case. Okay. But what we can do is we could use the plot command, plot, and then it wants the X variable and comma the Y variable. Okay, and so if I'm pulling from the MPG data, MPG, and I want display on, which is, I guess, the displacement or something like that on the X-axis, then I'm going to attach it with a $sign to access just that column. Okay. Comma, because it wants X, comma, Y. MPG, $sign, and then I want highway just to try to replicate the graph that I just saw here. You can scroll through all the different options, but this is all it needs, right? It needs it in the format. So plot X, comma, Y. Or another option is plot Y tilde X. That comes up later. We use that format later. So sometimes I'll introduce it like this, but here to match the X comma Y, I've used the X comma Y shorthand. Notice that I'm not saying X equals. I can say X equals and Y equals, but you don't have to. I'm pretty sure same thing here, but I haven't played around with that. I just go with it. So now if I run this plot, oh, that's not as nice, right? Have you guys seen Getter Girls? It's a really funny show. But anyways, at one point they're like, it's just not as nice about pizza. Anyway, so this is just not as nice, right? And so we wouldn't use it in a report, right? It would look pretty low level for reporting. But if you're just trying to get your point across or just checking something quickly, I tend to use base plots because they're way easier, right? And I can zoom in, I guess here shows the same graph. I'm going to stretch it out a little bit here, give it some space. Okay, so here, right, base plot, you can make adjustments, but not nearly as many as you do in ggplot. So now let's take this base plot and compare it to the ggplot command. And what you can do, if you've made multiple plots in the plots window here, you can flip back and forth to compare the two here. And you can zoom in if you want to kind of see a nicer version of it. Of course, I'm all kind of compressed to keep things all on the same screen here, but
Quick question.
Yes.
Your plots are showing up in that little bottom right-hand corner. Mine are
Yep.
showing up directly in the RMD like programming section.
Oh, that's a new fancy thing that I have seen. And if you want to turn that off, because I didn't like it, so I turned it off immediately. How did I do that?
You said it's fancy. It's
well, it's like a new thing that they introduced.
So it's preferable to do it that way, like
probably. I'm old school, so I thought, okay. Get this junk out of here.
Okay,
I don't want to see that.
I'm forward thinking, so I guess I'll keep doing it my way.
As long as you can see the graph, I'm happy.
Okay, yeah, me too.
Cool. Yeah, so if it's showing up in here in the kind of as part of your markdown, I disabled that because it confused me for some reason. I don't know, should I be embarrassed? I don't know. Right, so I disabled it. I like to just have them over here, but if you see them here and you're okay with that, then that's great. Okay, so ggplot has kind of this structure. Okay, so we're going to make a ggplot, and ggplot needs to know what the data is that it wants to be about, right? So what data do we need to reference, right? And we use that same thing here. We said, oh, it's actually for the miles per gallon data. Okay, and so here we're saying that, okay, for this whole plot, we're going to be referencing miles per gallon. So instead of referencing it twice, like I did here in the base plot, you just tell it data equals MPG. So that's that first chunk is just, hey, I'm about to make a ggplot where the data is MPG. And I'm pretty sure that you could just do this. Let me try it. It could fail miserably. Okay, so it worked, it figured it out, but it didn't like it, right? And so don't be sloppy like me, just have the data equals, so I'm gonna undo that, right? It wants the explicit data equals MPG, but it will run if you just say ggplot of MPG. So that's the first thing, it needs to know just the data. But if we try to run just this command, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight just the ggplot of data equals MPG, then nothing's going to happen, right? But I'm going to do it just to try. So notice what I did was I highlighted it all and then I hit Control Enter, and then it ran just ggplot data equals MPG. And then for emphasis, it shows this blank space. So what it's saying is that, okay, I'm ready to go to MPG and grab some information here, but you haven't told me what you want yet, so I'm ready, right? So then here, what we do is we attach these different, what do they call them? I feel like they call them aesthetics, but then the aesthetics comes out here. Different components, okay? So you say, I want a ggplot of the MPG data, and I want some geometric point, which is really just, so the geom is referring to kind of the shape that you want. Do you want a line graph? Do you want a scatter plot? Because then you're going to use the geom point. You could get a bar graph, right? Geom bar. I'm sure there's a geom pi. I've never checked it out, right? And so on and so forth. So the geom point gives us the scatter plot, so the points on the plot. Then it calls the mapping, and I want to get rid of this highlight there. So then it calls the mapping command inside the geom point, which means that the points that we want have to map to something. right? And so, and then it's got the aesthetics. So the mapping can take multiple components. The first one being, okay, well, what do you want on the x-axis and what do you want on the y-axis? Now, because I told it that MPG is here, that's my data, then I don't need to do MPG $ displacement, which is typically how you would kind of hard code which variable name you want, right? The data set $, the variable name. Okay. So here I can just do x equals displacement and y equals highway. Okay. And so we're going to build, we can build inside the aesthetics. Okay. So that's all the points that are being mapped to and just the look of those points. Okay. And we can add to the mapping as well. You know, so we're going to play around with that a little bit. But here, I'll talk about what we just said. So we first need to tell ggplot what data we are using for the graph. Okay. Then we specify that we are making a scatter plot by using, and I'll use the geom point function. Okay. The mapping specifies how those points are mapped to the graph. What's nice about a nice ggplot, if you have, for example, a nice scatter plot for a ggplot that you have, then I would suggest building some sort of library for yourself where you can just copy and paste those code chunks and just have those ready and just tweak the data, tweak the X and the Y variables, and then, you know, make tweaks to it as you go. You don't need to recreate these things every single time. That's crazy. We're doing a lot of copy paste here. So the mapping specifies how those points are mapped to the graph. The aesthetics, in this case, only require the X and Y axes. Okay, good. So kind of a nice, and I'll bring up the proper plot again. Kind of a nice sort of basic scatter plot, right? Now we can change things, like we can change the color of some of these points. We can change the color of all of the points. We can change the lines. So by default, it has these lines. We can change that. We can change the labels, but all of those changes, you should think of them as layers in ggplot. Okay, and so what's going to happen is, let's say you wanted to change, I don't remember how to do it. I'd have to look it up, but that's okay. Right, if I wanted to remove these axes in the background, right, then I would need to add that as an argument, as another argument to my ggplot layering. Okay. So let's see here. So they make these graphing templates, but what I find is a little bit easier is just to have one as a reference that's working with, for example, miles per gallon, or there are a lot of data sets that are built into R that don't require any other packages, but to use ggplot, you have to have the ggplot2 package. So you can use, diamonds or MPG or whatever. So I suggest that on your own, you work through these exercises, and I posted the solutions on our Moodle page at the top of our Moodle page, so you can work through those, right? But that's going to be really good to help you kind of solidify some of these concepts. So now, like I said, what if we wanted to do something like, I want to color and highlight a certain group of cars in this case, right? Because our data set is about cars and the miles per gallon, the fuel efficiency. And so what if I'm concerned with a certain classification of cars? So what we can do is we can look at the class value. I actually didn't realize that that was it, but maybe it's from reading it. It's the type of car class, I guess, a compact vehicle, SUV, truck, blah, blah, blah. Right. And so what if we want to look at a specific class? Now, what I can do is compare this code to the code that we just used and notice that it has the same information up until the added aesthetic, and notice that the aesthetic is for the points of color equals class, right? And so class is a variable in the data set. So now if I copy this, and what if I make a new R code chunk down here and I paste it? What if I run this? See what happens. I'm going to zoom in here. I'll kind of make it bigger, try to. So notice that it took the class variable that we had in our data set and it assigns a color. It automatically assigns a color to each car class. And I'm pretty sure it cuts it off at a certain number, but maybe that's for something else. So if you were interested in only SUVs, for example, that would be the pink. And so they're kind of hanging out down here, right? Low highway, high displacement, it looks like. Right, and so this gives us some information. For example, it looks like just by looking at the colors, I can see that the pink basically has no overlap with the green, which means that the SUV and the mid-size cars have no overlap in terms of highway, but they do have some overlap in terms of displacement, whatever that is, right? I don't know about cars, and it doesn't matter. Right, but I can see the variable names and kind of talk about them. Okay, so we changed the color of, which is an aesthetic, right? We changed the color of the point by using the color equals and then the variable name. So we can add a different color. I think it'll use how we spell color or the American spelling. And I noticed that they switch back and forth between the two. So they must have had multiple authors, because I think Hadley's in New Zealand, or he's from New Zealand. I don't know where he is now, but so I think he would use the British spelling like we do. And then an American came in and contributed a little bit, and then we've got this mix up. But I'm pretty sure, let me try it, that it'll just, yeah, it just does the same thing. So it can handle it. For me, I just color without the U, it looks weird, but it doesn't matter. to the data points that represent the vehicle class. Okay. Since this is a change to the points, we add it as an argument to the AES function. Okay. AES is aesthetics. Which is the look. How about that? Right. So once you start dissecting these things, they start to make a little bit more sense, right? Hey, there's even a note here. It's like they were listening. I don't think I read that part actually. Yeah, if you prefer British English like me and Hadley, we're a cool group of kids. You can use color instead of color. Anyways. Okay. What if you wanted to do something crazy like a bubble chart? Right? We talked about bubble charts and their benefits because we're able to display information from 3 variables instead of just 2 in a scatter plot, right? So there are some benefits. And the first example is this one here. So I'm going to copy it. We, caps lock, we can make a bubble chart by adding a size argument to the AES function, right? Again, it's about the look of the bubbles, or since it changes the look of the points. Okay. So here, I'll paste that code that I stole, and it's got this warning. We're going to see that ourselves, so I'm going to delete that. So notice that it uses the size function, so that's the size of the point, and that can be, and we're going to assign it to class temporarily. It's not going to like that because remember, class is a categorical variable. So there's no reason for a 2-seater to have a smaller bubble than a pickup truck, for example, right? And so size bubbles should be dictated by quantitative data. Right? So the size of the bubbles should be determined by a quantitative variable instead of a categorical variable like class. Let's consider what's a categorical variable or a quantitative variable. Let's consider CTY, probably the city mileage. Let's consider CTY instead. So first, let's have a run of this code chunk and see what's happening here. And notice that it came up with the same warning that was in that code chunk that we copied. So using size for a discrete variable is not advised. And by discrete here, they mean a categorical variable, right? There's no reason for the SUV to have the largest dot and the subcompact to be the next largest dot, and it doesn't tell us any information, right? And so what we'll do is I'm just going to copy this whole thing. And all I'm going to change is I'm going to change the size argument to CTY, just to see what happens. Run this chunk. And now it makes a little bit more sense because now a small dot has a 10 city, I don't know, fuel economy, something, something. 15 is a little bit bigger. So now it is increasing according to the size of the CTY variable. I wonder, just throwing it out there, could I combine the size and the color? Why not? Right? Can I build on top of this? Can I go color equals, well, that might be cute. What if I do CTY again? So that not only it's excessive, but I can't think of another one to do it by, or maybe I'll do color by class. All of a sudden I have 4 pieces of information on my graph. Let's see if it'll run. I haven't tried it. Whoo! Things just got interesting. Let me zoom in here. Did I hit it? Come on. It doesn't want to make it bigger. Okay. It just doesn't want to. Because I want to have a good look at this thing. And it won't let me zoom in. Anyways, that's pretty good. So a little bit confusing, right? Because I've added the size of the dots also with the class, right? And so the bigger dots are the 35 city, fuel economy, whatever. And the biggest one that I can see is this big purple one. So it has a 35 fuel economy and it is a subcompact, whatever that means. Right? Too much information in here for my liking, right? Kind of, I would probably break it up into 2 graphs, but it's something that we can do, right? So we can just add layers as we go and just to see what's going on. Now, let me get this back down to, bring it back down to Earth here. Okay. Well, that looks weird. Anyways. Okay, so that's good. Another thing you could do is instead of the size or even, I think the size one, we could change the shape. Oh yeah. So instead of, and this is how it's gonna go, right? Once you get used to seeing some of these things, it's like, oh, can I change the shape of these so that instead of having maybe the sizes of the bubbles, maybe I could have a different shape. And it looks like I can, right? Kind of skipping through these here. I've got the alpha equals class, and I'll talk about alpha in a little bit here, but here I see the shape equals class. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do, instead of size equals city, I'm gonna do shape equals city. Notice that there are only a few different categories in city. So even though it's numerical, presumably, I can still just have it in categories. So what if I run this now? Oh, like it. Shape can be cylinder. Let's try that. Hey, cylinder is an integer in here. Okay, model, that's gonna work. It's gonna make a mess though, because I think there are a lot of models. I feel like it's too zoomed in because here it's got more information. Anyways, you can change the shape and you can play around with it, but what it's not liking, what I'm doing is I'm trying to, because I'm kind of stuck with these variables here, and I've used a lot of the good ones, but it doesn't like, oh, here, how about I do drive instead? That's a better one. Front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, or all wheel drive. That's only 3 categories. It should be happy now, and it is. Will it zoom in? That's the question. I don't know. Doesn't seem like it. So now, right, I can see the drive. Instead of using size here, I can see it but by the different shapes, and it's a lot easier to see. So if I did something like this, then I could have these 4 pieces of information all in the same graph, right? I could have the class, I can have the drive, I can have the displacement, and I can have the highway measurements, right? The overall relationship. So it does warn you that it will only use 6 shapes at a time, okay? And so any additional groups are not plotted. So that's something to keep in mind, right? You want to make sure that you have fewer than 6 shapes, right? Or things assigned to shape. Okay. So here, what's the difference between the code that we ran and this next code? I'm going to copy it. Consider the differences in these 2 chunks of code. First, I'm going to do that one, and then I'm going to do this one. Show a little space there. So if I consider the differences here, right, starts off the same, I'm convinced. And then, of course, it's doing a scatter plot with the aesthetic. It's mapping the aesthetic, and then hold up. In the first one that we saw, right, and just to match it, I'll have the color equals class. So notice that I've taken from the data, I need to assign the color based on the class, right? Whereas here, what I'm doing is I'm assigning the color blue to all of the points, right? So from earlier, the code from earlier assigns the color based on what class the car was in, while the new code assigns a color of blue. Notice the quotes because it needs to have quotes because it's a word. A color of blue to all of the points. So there are subtle differences, but notice that the color equals blue, if you're assigning it to all of the points, goes outside of the aesthetics, and it's in the point argument, right? So notice in the new code, the color argument is added to the geom point function, not the AES function. Okay. Oh, wait, I'm out of time. Oh my gosh. I'm going to knit it just for fun. We're going to get a huge long document, and isn't that so satisfying? And it should have all these beautiful graphs. I'll start with a bunch of stuff, right? And so here you can have a summary. And so I'll post this markdown file and you can knit it to produce the same thing. But let me stop sharing so I can see you guys. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, on Friday, we're just going to do that quiz. So if you want to do it during that time or anytime during the weekend is fine. So we will not meet here on Friday. It's kind of your own time. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.
So there is no class on Friday, no meeting at all? Like you're not going to be here at all?
No,
Yeah.
Just, well, I mean, I can be, but I wasn't planning on it. I want to give you guys some time. You could do the quiz. So the quiz will be 50 minutes. So it will be that chunk of time. So if you wanted to use that class time to do it, but I didn't want to force you to do that. So I'll keep it open for the rest of the weekend, but it will be a 50-minute quiz.
Okay, and what might I do to prepare for this 50-minute quiz?
It's from the lecture material. So from the lecture notes is where I'm grabbing stuff. And of course, you're just working through it on your own. So you'll have access to the notes. You'll have access to everything. Yeah. But it'll be from the lecture. Cool. Fun. All right. Oh, I guess I should stop this recording. Just us chatting.